Hey everyone, making sure we go live here. And yes, there we are. Let me pause that so I don't have to watch myself talk while I'm going talking to you guys. I'm Jason Loxton, and this is Exploring Sous Vide, where we're all about helping you get the most out of your sous vide machine while talking to some of the biggest names in the industry. Today's episode is brought to you by the International Sous Vide Association and Amazing Food Made Easy. So make sure to check out the upcoming virtual Sous Vide Summit and snag some tickets today for 15% off by using the promo code SVS15OFF at afmeasy.com/2020. It'll take you right there, and that code is SVS15OFF. I'll put that in I think Mike is here, so he'll put it in the comments. And we have a full lineup of amazing speakers like Rich Rosendale, James Bricione, AJ Schaller, Eric Villegas, and of course, today's guests. Because if you follow sous vide recipes, you see a lot of steak and potatoes, a ton of Midwestern fare, and some Italian dishes. And that's about it. But sous vide can be used in all cuisines. Many cooks don't know where to start, though. And today's guests are the perfect people to help us explore that. They were the husband and wife team behind Kind of Cooking. While they were not professionally trained, they understood that sous vide can provide restaurant quality food, and that is how Kind of Cooking was born. As they continued to cook and eat their way through research and experiments, they noticed a lack of Asian-inspired sous vide recipes available. Hours were spent in the kitchen recreating childhood favorites and popular dishes. They share their sous vide experiments, what they've learned, and delicious recipes via kindofcooking.com and their popular YouTube channel, Kind of Cooking. If you haven't checked them out, you need to do that as soon as we get off of this interview. So I can't wait to learn from today's guest, Carmen and Kevin from Kind of Cooking. Welcome, you two.
Thank you for having us, Jason.
I can't wait to dive into some of the things that have inspired you, some of the food, but I like to start every episode off with, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
There's a lot of leftover food. There's only two of us, so we are pretty much eating leftovers pretty much every day, and anytime we shoot, we're shooting 3 episodes a day. So we're eating all that all week long.
When we do the leftovers, we usually for the sous vide will be like one big chunk of meat or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't eat the same meat 5 days straight. So we'll try to make it in fried rice, or make it in a stir-fry noodle, we'll make it in a soup. So we repurpose this meat into 3 or 5 different dishes.
I think as a food blogger, you definitely start to understand like how you can repurpose stuff. That I just made enough pork chops to like take a big picture of the table and the spread, and now I have to do something with it. And there's 2 of us.
And COVID is not helping, right? Like before, at least we can invite people over. Now it's the 2 of us just shoveling it all in. Yeah, we actually ran out of freezer space like weeks and months ago. And it looks like everyone's buying a freezer, so we can't even get one.
Yeah, it's definitely I think if your freezer is not full as a food blogger, you're just not doing it right.
Yeah.
You know. So we got a few people joining in. Welcome everyone to the show. We have Mike Lashardy calling me Huggy Bear that Kevin Liddell started. Nice to see you as well, Kevin. We got Mark Webb. He's also speaking, just like Kevin is at the Sous Vide Summit. So if all of you have questions that you have for Carmen and Kevin, drop them in the comments. We will address them later in the program. We want to make sure we get all of your questions answered, and they have a wealth of information. So let us know what direction you want this to go. And Mark says we need portion control. That's which is very true, but it also doesn't look as pretty if you're trying to make a good picture.
You don't eat like this much meat, right? How can you photograph one picture of meat of just like that? It needs to be this much.
All macro.
I did I don't know if you saw Mike's put up a post I think 2 days ago of a chicken leg, and his plate was about this size and the chicken leg was this big, and it looked like it came from an ostrich or something.
They're the sous vide idea, ostrich.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Justice does that. He's does just about a little bit of everything.
All right, we're gonna check that out.
Okay, so on to the sous vide.
Okay.
I just want to start by talking about your General Tso's chicken. That is one of my favorite dishes. And like your pictures of it look amazing. I'll pull it up so people can see it. But Carmen, you actually got to meet the inventor of the dish. Is that right?
Yeah. So a few years back, I was working on a food show called Confucius Was a Foodie. And the show was about basically tracing all these different Chinese influences in the world. So at one point, we got to go to Taiwan and meet the creator of General Tso's chicken. So his name is Peng Changgui. That's a chef. And at that time, I think he was like already like 96 or 97. There's a funny story. So we contacted his son. They actually own a group of restaurants in Taiwan. And his son is like, oh, we would love to interview with you, but my dad is old. Let me see what I can do. So the son told his dad, he's like, hey, Dad, come to the restaurant. We'll have lunch today. And when the dad arrived, all the cameras were there. And the dad was like, what is going on? So no, the dad wasn't angry or anything. He was like, he was actually really happy to see us. But he was such actually a really humble guy. That was like, yeah, I wish I was younger. I want to do more for Chinese food. I want to, let people know more about Chinese food. And we actually got to taste the original recipe of General Tso's chicken that he created at the restaurant.
Oh, wow.
It's not exactly the same as what you would have in America. It's less sweet. It's a little bit more spicy. But it was incredible just to be able to taste that. Like, obviously, he didn't cook as he was in a wheelchair and all that, but he was instructing the chef what to do in the kitchen. And that was a really incredible experience.
That's really cool. Like, it's such a classic, like, Chinese American dish that's on every, Chinese American menu basically in the country. And to meet the person that did it and to try the original version of it is, I don't know, it's very, very cool.
We actually invented it in the US.
Yeah.
Right?
So I forgot which year. Basically, he used to be the presidential chef for Chiang Kai-shek. And they were hosting a state dinner in the US. And so he asked Chef Peng to create the dish, a dish for the guests. And then Chef Peng was like, okay, Westerners don't like the typical Chinese banquet fare, all the abalone and the dried seafood delicacies, those type of food. So he's like, okay, I know Westerners like chicken. Let's do a chicken dish. And then I know Westerners like the more heavy flavor. So he made it spicy, he made it like sweet, he made it salty, and it was a popular hit. And from there on, it just caught on fire. I think back in the 70s or 50s, is it 50s or 70s? I don't remember which year now. Don't quote me on that. He used to have a restaurant in New York, and Kissinger used to go there, frequent there all the time to eat his General Tso's chicken.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's just so it's in all restaurants, and it's just such a good dish. I love how different palates, like you have to change the flavors if you're going to different markets.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot to Crea, and they will do a lot in France, and they always say like how they tweak the different dishes to make sure like the American palate prefers it this way and the French palate wants it to be a little bit softer and squishier, but here we don't like that. It tastes undercooked to us. And it's the knowledge that you need to do that is amazing.
Yeah, that's really the skill of a Chinese chef. You see Chinese restaurants all around the world, right? And how do they survive using the local ingredients and adapting it to local taste? That's them understanding the diner's wants and adapting those to them. And I guess that's how they survive, and that's how they flourish around the world.
Makes sense. Being able to be adaptable and not kind of be stuck in what you normally do. So you say that you mainly focus on recipes with an Asian flair. How did you originally pick which ones to start experimenting with?
I guess we mainly started with our childhood favorites. That's where
Nice.
we started, right? Like that's what we know, that's what we grew up on. And most of those are classics because growing up, your parents are not going to go and get you the most expensive food. It's all going to be comfort food, what they grew up on. So that's where we started. And we started with, the barbecue pork. And I think that's, I guess, both of our favorites. So we started there. That's like what we get all the time. We started there. And then from there, we just moved and we looked at like what else we like and what is adaptable to sous vide from Chinese cooking.
What's your process for your pork?
For pork. Okay, so for the pork, like as in for the experiment, we started with flavors that we knew were in there. And I guess in general, we just play around until we get a flavor that we like, and we keep going and building on it. And then we work on, in most cases, we try to get a time and a temperature that will give us the best results in the shortest amount of time. Because personally, I don't really like those really, really long cooks. So I always try and get as short as possible. So I think for that, we did like 140 Fahrenheit and for about 8 hours. And that for us was like, the texture was very similar to what you would get in a barbecue or Chinese barbecue place, but it was much, much juicier. So that's pretty much how we started. Yeah, all
nice.
favorites.
Tenderizes it just a little bit, but it's not breaking it down too much where it's kind of like that softer pork choppy.
Yeah. And I think that's really important in Chinese cuisine. Like the texture is one of, I guess you can consider one of the flavors even, because texture in the dish is, and like there's different layers of texture that is needed. For example, for the Hainanese chicken, a lot of people don't like the skin, but that skin and the gelatinous portion between the skin is really important for that dish.
The chicken itself doesn't have a lot of taste because you actually dip it in the different sauces, but people actually eat it for the texture. There's a lot of foods that Chinese people eat or Asian people eat that they go for the texture instead of the taste. Like, I don't think you guys have tried sea cucumber before. It's like this little like petrified little cucumber thing that you need to take like 2 weeks to soak to like the right size. And then the food itself doesn't have
no flavor. Zero.
Has no
None.
flavor. You would need to like brew like a really, really nice stock, not brew, cook. Well,
braise
it and put all the flavor in. But the texture is a gelatinous texture that people are going for, and that is considered a delicacy. So texture is super important for Chinese cooking.
Justice Stewart, who we mentioned, did jellyfish, and I think he did it in the Szechuan style. And probably a week after that, I was at, I live in New York, and we went to a more authentic Chinese restaurant, and they had jellyfish on there. So we had to order it and try it. And I see what you mean about the texture, because like the jellyfish, like I don't know if I've ever had anything that has a texture like that. It was not something I enjoyed, but everyone, like all the waiters are like, oh yeah, my mom used to make this, and this reminds me of my childhood and growing up. And it was definitely a very, very unique texture.
Then don't try sea cucumber. I think it's pretty much the same texture for like triple the price.
Kevin posted, I just subscribed to your YouTube channel today. I thought I had before, but apparently not. What are your favorite recipes on there?
Okay.
Thank you. I think my favorite would be the duck recipe, the Cantonese roast duck. And what's special about that one is that it's not the typical Cantonese roast duck. It's called pipa duck. Pipa is a ancient Chinese instrument. The way they make it is that they would what's that thing called? Is it
butterfly?
Butterfly? No.
Spatchcock.
Spatchcock it.
But
and then they would put the that's the instrument. They would put the flavoring, the spices inside where the bones are as well. So the bones itself are tasty. The typical Cantonese roast duck is only on the outside. So this one is tasty on the inside and outside. And you don't actually see this method being used a lot anymore because it's quite a bit of process to make it. So I thought that was a really cool dish that we were able to recreate.
What's your technique for doing that?
So for this one, you open up the bird, but you open it up from, instead of spatchcocking it through the back and taking out the backbone, you do it through the breast. And I think I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that it's so you can open it up to look like the instrument, but also I think it's partly to do that Chinese people don't waste any part of the animal. So all of it needs to be there. And then if we spatchcocked it through the back, we would remove the backbone. So that has to stay there. And then, so what did we do? Did we dry that one first?
No, we sous vide it.
Yeah.
Then we dried it with some red vinegar.
Yeah.
So that adds a little extra color and it speeds up the drying process.
Yeah.
Then we put it in the oven to crisp up the skin.
Yeah.
And do you still get pretty crisp skin, even though it's been, sogified a little bit in the sous vide?
It's actually was pretty crispy. It's not like what you would get if you deep fried it, but it had the right textures. What we found was that if we tried a bunch of different methods here. So we did try it on broil first, but that browned it too fast and didn't allow the fat to render. So we turned it down. We turned it like probably as hot as our oven would go, and that helped it render brown at the same time. And we also tried frying it, but we found that frying it right away didn't give it the right texture. So we found that putting in the oven, then pouring oil over it gave us a much...
oven, put it in a wok.
Sorry, put it in...
You put it over a wok.
Over a wok, and we ladled oil over it.
And another important thing is that we air dried it in the oven, in the fridge, for like overnight, right? At least overnight. So that helps to dry out the skin and draw out the moisture.
I do that when I make chicken wings. I cook them the day before, leave them uncovered in the fridge overnight to dry out before trying to fry them for the same reason.
Yeah, that really helps.
What dish have you found that sous vide made the biggest difference over the traditional method?
For me, it's always pork. Like any pork dish that I've done in the sous vide has taken it to the next level, and I think that's why you see a lot of pork dishes on our channel. Like the first time it was a non-Asian dish, we did a pork chop, and that's when I was sold on the sous vide. Like that pork chop completely sold me. My first steak was terrible. The bag broke. I had no idea what I was doing. It was way overcooked. It tasted like boiled meat. We need to try something else. So we tried the pork chop, and that was the best thing I've had.
I think pork chop definitely kind of highlights the benefits of sous vide. I do a hands-on cooking class, and that's one of the things I make sure I cook, because I do it with just like salt and pepper, and it's normal grocery store like pork chop, and I'm like, try this. And it just blows people's mind because it's just so much more moist and tender, and it's like what you can't normally get unless you're at a high-end restaurant.
Yeah, and like growing up, everything was cooked all the way, like well done, beyond there. It's way too far to even come back. So even putting sauce on didn't help. So the sous vide really helps to pasteurize it before that point, and you can still eat it, and there's still juice in it. It's not cardboard.
Yeah, it's just as safe, but it's so much more flavorful.
Yeah.
Kevin says, what temperature do you sous vide your pork tenderloin at?
Tenderloin. Do we do? I think we usually do. Almost all of our pork is done at 140, except for belly, which is done at 155 or higher, depending on what we are going for. I think for some of our pork bellies, we did even higher, 180s, in the 180 range.
Makes sense. I do 140 for all my pork too, including tenderloin. What dish have people responded to the best?
I think it was probably the first one we did, the barbecue pork, because that's like for an Asian household, that is comfort food, right? That's what we always had. Every so often you go out and your parents are gonna come back with this chunk of meat, they're gonna slice it. You can have that with rice, and that's like what everyone knows, right? I guess in part of the post there was a movie clip, and we all grew up with that movie as well. God of Cookery, hilarious movie, Stephen Chow, and so I guess that
basically for him is just like such simple foods can bring back so much memories and so much, like it's like the sorrowful rice, like you eat it and then you would like have a tear in your eye. It's like, but it's the simple. He was in a food competition. He was making some really, I guess, extravagant dish, but then obviously like the enemy broke it or something like that. So he only had like 10 minutes to make his dish. So it was just barbecue pork on rice. And the judge basically was like exclaiming and like jumping with joy and eating. It's like, oh my God, it's like ratatouille. It's like the ratatouille, right? So for us, anytime we eat that dish, it just reminds us of, family, childhood, anytime that when parents don't want to cook, they will go buy a slab of barbecue pork and we'll just have it on rice.
Yeah.
I love those childhood dishes that is just like a simple meal, but it reminds you of, it gives you so much emotion and so many memories of growing up and just having that meal over and over and over again throughout the years.
Yeah. But the thing is that for me, I'm Cantonese, and Chinese barbecue pork is a Cantonese dish. I felt like that this pork is the most juiciest Chinese barbecue pork I've ever had.
Yeah, we have not bought it again after we made it.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Like I was actually a little skeptical before we had it, because I'm like, it's everywhere. Why would people want to make it at home in the sous vide, right? It's so easily buy it from the supermarket. But once you make it, there's like, why do I even want to buy it? It's like this, the difference of flavor and texture.
Yeah, that's one thing we always have it in our freezer. We when we make it, we make a bunch, throw it in the freezer, warm it back up, put it on the grill or smoker, oven, whatever works on at that time. And then we have a good meal in under an hour.
I think sometimes it can be really intimidating to cook those like childhood favorites too, because sometimes you don't want to like improve upon them because it's then not what you want. You kind of want that simple, less fancy version. And I get in trouble when I make macaroni and cheese because my wife wants Kraft macaroni and cheese. And she doesn't want any spices or seasoning or like anything. She wants just milk. You just pour. No, nothing. And so we've come to an understanding that I never cook macaroni and cheese unless it's just going to be straight up Kraft.
Right.
We're grown up now. We're adults now, so we can eat moist pork.
Yeah, she eats just about everything else I cook, but that's one of the few that she's like, no, when I want mac and cheese, I just want simple. So you said the steak didn't work very well, but have you had any big struggles or failures when you've been really trying to adapt a dish?
Oh yeah, I think we struggle all the time. Every episode is a struggle. Let's see which one was the most struggle. I think the hardest one was related to that barbecue one, but it's for the roasted pork, the one with the crispy skin on top. That one was the most difficult for us. It's the simplest one, but it's hard to get the skin to that perfect texture that we need in the short amount of time while warming the bottom and getting the skin crisp. I think that was the hardest part, of getting the correct texture that I wanted. And so actually we're still working on that one, and we're planning to reshoot that one in a couple of weeks. And we're planning to do a whole, like, test at all the temperatures that I want to test in one episode. So hopefully we can get through that. But that one was the hardest. Like it seemed so simple. I was like, we should be able to do that right now. No problem. No.
I think the main problem is that because sous vide is basically about moisture, right? So with that skin, you need to make it really, really dry to create that crisp. So for our other pork belly recipe with the tom poro, it's perfect because you want to break the skin, you want to render the fat, and it just melts in your mouth. But for the crispy pork belly, that's completely opposite. So how do you keep the moisture in the meat, but take the moisture out of the skin? I think that's the main challenge that we're facing with that dish.
Have you tried removing the skin and cooking it separately?
That's
a little blasphemous.
That is one of the plans I was planning to do, and that's what she said. So
I do that for turkey, like for Thanksgiving. You can remove that and then bake it in like between two sheet pans, and it comes out. You can get pretty much any texture you want, from a little bit crispy but still have some good chew to it, to like almost like glass or like hard candy almost. It's
right.
Pure skin hard candy is, I think that's a winner right there.
Okay, I will try it. I don't think she'll like it though.
No, but if you say it as something else, maybe, you know how the suckling pig?
Yeah.
Sometimes when they serve it in the restaurant, they have the skin is a separate thing. They'll have the meat separate and the skin separate, and the skin they'll have it in the bun or in like a wrap, and then you can put some scallion or hoisin sauce in there. So if you sell it to me that way, then you can separate the skin. But if you sell it to me as a crispy pork belly of a typical Chinese barbecue shop, you cannot do that.
You're willing to go only so far with trying to reinvent the classics.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is trying to like reinventing it, but we're trying to keep as close to traditional as possible, right? Like we're still trying to keep some of the tradition. Like you'll notice that our chickens are usually cooked at a higher temperature than people always complain. Why are you cooking it so high? Why are you doing the whole bird and all that stuff? Because I feel like that's important to us to try and keep part of that tradition, like cooking the whole bird, trying to use everything and making sure like the bird is cooked all the way through. And like there's like specific things, like the skin needs to be a certain texture, the fat needs to be perfectly rendered, the meat needs to be fully cooked, but the bone still has to have a little bit of red in it. So those are like all things that we try to balance and try and keep that tradition.
I guess like for us, we're not like the modernist deconstructing a whole bird and then you'll have only one piece on the plate with all this sauce on the side. We're not like that.
Although we like that.
We like it, but like that's just kind of not us. So we're trying to figure out how to use the sous vide at home, right? Because these are for home cooks at the end of the day, that are recipes. So that's not something that a regular person would do. So that's why we try to stay away from that.
One of the things, because there's some American dishes that people prefer served whole or in specific ways. And so some of the things I talk about is, if you do want to do like a bird for Thanksgiving and you break down your turkey, like you can plate it in a way that it looks like no one's going to care necessarily, that it does look still like a big bird of cooked meat, coming out of the kitchen. Or, if you do a prime rib, you can cut it into slabs and sous vide it and then put it back together pretty much, just on the serving platter. So at least you can kind of bring out that big tray of food for everyone to ooh and ah over before eating. Because sometimes it is very important.
Yeah.
We got a lot of slack for our turkey too. People are like, no, that's not how you use a sous vide. You can't do it that way. I'm like, you're not eating my food. Leave me alone. Every time I do the whole thing.
I was very skeptical about doing, the sous vide for Thanksgiving for the turkey. And it was probably about, after I did it, I was like, well, that was so easy. I hope people are like okay with it. And it was probably 10 minutes in. I think it was my mother-in-law just turned to me and was like, we're never doing it any other way again. This is so much better than we've had ever for Thanksgiving. So just keep doing whatever you did.
Same thing. Like my mom is really skeptical on sous vide food. So we never tell her. And so we had the whole Thanksgiving, like we cooked everything, like the entire
That was our challenge, right? We're like, we're going to do every single thing in the sous vide.
Yeah, so we cooked the entire sous vide, like entire Thanksgiving meal in the sous vide. Everyone came over, they all ate it. They're like, oh, this is great. We should do it every year. I'm like, yeah, well, it was cooked in there. What do you think of that now?
Got y'all.
Yeah, exactly. It was good.
Had a few comments come in. Seth wanted to know what the recipe that challenged you most, and that was right when I asked the question about the pork. So he accused me of stealing his question. Sorry about that, Seth. Don't take it out on me. Seth is doing all the logistics for the Sous Vide Summit, so he's working with a lot of our speakers and probably is burying me somewhere behind a bunch of other good speakers, so no one will see my session since I stole the question. We had Mark Webb, another speaker at the conference. He said he's found it really hard to get the skin crisp well after sous vide because of the breakdown of collagen to gelatin. Removing it's the only way that he's been able to get true barbecue, like crispy skin. He tends to remove it and glaze the pork instead.
Okay. And
Kevin says, what am I drinking? I'm drinking a daiquiri. So going back to the original Exploring Sous Vide show that I did with Dave Petranczyk from Polyscience. I did not bring out my smoking gun and smoke this, but it is a daiquiri for tonight. Let's see. Mark asked about using meat glue to reassemble it. You could definitely do that. I don't know if that's most of the home cooks are down for that. I normally just say if you stand them up next to each other, they don't fall over if you're careful, but you could use meat glue. It works very well.
We never tried that.
No, I didn't.
The meat glue. Have you guys read about the meat glue at all?
We read about it. We've never. Well, I read about it, but I've never thought about using it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done it a little bit when I was doing more exploring modernist cooking a lot more. So I did a few things with it, and it's really interesting just how it does look like one piece of meat at the end. It completely reseals that seam. It's real interesting.
Right.
So we can fake it.
Yep. Yeah, you can cut that apart, and then some people use it to season the inside of meat because if you have a big roast, you can't get flavor into the inside, so they dice it up, toss it with seasonings, use the meat glue, and then reassemble it. And then when you slice through, it's pretty evenly seasoned all throughout.
Interesting.
So are there let's see. So we talked about the traditionalists that you've had some pushback, definitely, even in your own home.
Yeah.
So are there some classic dishes that take advantage of cheap or little known cuts that you found work good with sous vide?
Whatchamacallit? Beef shank. Beef shank.
Yeah. Beef shank. I think that one was based off our trip to Taiwan for the same show. We got to eat the most expensive bowl of noodles in the world.
It's $300 US.
Whoa.
300.
Oh, 300.
Or maybe the currency changed now, but back when we had it was $300 US.
Yeah. Luckily, we didn't have to pay.
That's the best part of the show. Even though it was really hard work traveling. Well, when you tell people you're traveling and shooting, they're like, "Oh, this is such a great job," but it's actually really hard. Yeah. But the best part is that you get to eat all this expensive food and you don't have to pay for it.
Well, actually, we were never sure if we had to pay for it or not.
That's true.
So we had a secret code word that in case we ever had to run, it was parkour. There's no way we would ever be able to afford these dishes, right? Like the meal, we're like $300 for a bowl of noodles. Like what was it? We had
Bow Innovation in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that one we're like, oh, I hope he's not coming with the bill. I hope he's not coming with the bill.
It was like $600 a person, not including the wine pairing.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then he never said anything. He's just like, oh, stay for dinner. And so we sit down and like the whole time we're eating, like, do we have to pay for this? Do I have to pay for this?
So sorry, back to your question about cheap cuts. Yeah, that beef shank, we tried to recreate that bowl of noodles. We're like, if we sous vide it, can we get close to it, right? So we know that they use Wagyu cuts. We know that they're using top of the line meat in that place. And we know that they cook it for 3 days. They're
not using sous vide though, because we went to their kitchen and we got to see how they stew it and all that in the back. Yeah.
So they do everything by hand, all like water, do it under control, braise it. So we're like, okay, with the sous vide, we could probably recreate it, have even more flavor because we're going to keep it all in the bag. And we can probably get close to that texture. And I think we got pretty close for what it was. We used the cheapest cut of beef shank we found at the supermarket, and they actually yelled at us for buying such a cheap shank and then putting it back and getting another one. So we tried that, and we got there, and I think it was pretty good. Like it was soft. It was the gelatinous thing, which you don't like, but it's okay, and it's important for me. And we cut the meat like they did using scissors for some reason. And that was the cheapest cut and some of the best meat we made.
Did you do like 130-ish for like 2 or 3 days, or did you go higher for shorter?
We went higher for shorter. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the long day cooks. I usually go shorter. Any chance I get to go shorter, I'll go shorter. So I think we did 155 for 24 to 36 hours, somewhere there. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but at that point, it's going to be very close.
Yeah, so you have that nice kind of lightly shreddable texture, but still have some decent bite to it. And
that one, like for that one, it needs to stay together. Like it cannot fall apart. You need to be able to pick it up with the chopsticks, but also still, as you said, like have a very light shred. When you bite it, it's just going to break.
Nice. Valerie says, all the way from Singapore here, found Kind of Cooking by chance while checking out how to do whole turkey and haven't looked back since. Definitely on my favorites for sous vide. Hope to see more Asian dishes reinvented through sous vide. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you.
We will definitely have more dishes for you, Valerie, and everyone else. We're working on a couple, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Mike says, talk about the different types of soy sauce.
Oh man.
Okay, so if you've ever been to a Chinese supermarket, there is literally an entire aisle of soy sauces. And that's not just different brands. It's actually different types. So soy sauce, I guess like you can see it as kind of like an olive oil in a way. Like you know how you have like the first press and the second press or the virgin press or extra virgin olive oil. You can do that with soy sauce as well. So obviously the first press would be the most premium soy sauce. So that's the Tao is like the head soy.
Yeah.
So the premium soy sauce, and that's what we use for the soy sauce chicken. The regular soy sauce that we use in everyday cooking is probably like second or third press. So it's not as expensive as the first press. And then there's a dark soy, which is slightly thicker, less flavor, but that one is used for coloring. Mm-hmm. There's also different types that people cook up, maybe like a fish soy sauce. So it's a very light soy sauce that you cook with some sugar. So when you steam a fish, you just pour some on top, and that's all the flavoring that you need. And there's also a soy sauce paste that Taiwanese people use a lot in their stir frying and cooking and braising. So the soy sauce itself is like a myriad of different ones. And there's also, you need to look for the ones, if you want to buy a good one, you want to have ones that's naturally brewed. There's a lot of ones that's, I guess, like made with chemicals now, that's made really quickly, maybe in a couple of months. You probably want ones that's naturally brewed a year, 2 years, 5 years. Those ones are probably better for you.
What are the kind of classic like kitchen pantry staples if someone's interested in starting to try to do some more cooking, even if they're, Asian cooking, there's a ton of different cuisines and different depending on the regions, but say they want to start following your channel and they want to know like, what do I need in my pantry to be able to follow, a lot of your recipes? What do you kind of recommend having on hand?
I think the soy sauce, yes.
All of the soy sauces they have.
Okay, the typical one and the dark one.
Yeah.
That's the two that you would need. You would need ginger, garlic, scallion. So that's the trinity of Chinese cooking. So kind of for Western cooking is carrots, onions, and celery, right? So ginger, garlic, and scallion. Cornstarch, actually.
Yeah,
because a lot of the sauces is thickened by cornstarch. Mm-hmm. Maybe 5 spice. Maybe some black vinegar. Actually, even vinegar, Chinese vinegar itself, there's a whole lot of different ones. Yeah. For the, I guess for the taste that we usually eat in maybe Chinese restaurants, American Chinese restaurants, would be the black vinegar. It's a little heavier. The Cantonese one use a red vinegar that they use. It's a little lighter. It's for fish and wontons, but that's not really used typically for cooking. What else?
I think you named everything. White pepper. Black pepper?
It's not really that important. Well, salt and pepper, obviously. Yeah. Sesame oil.
Oh, yeah. Sesame oil. We use
cooking wine.
Yep.
Cooking wine. There's actually a lot of different cooking wines as well. But you just go with the foolproof Shaoxing wine. A lot of times we put recipes, we use rose wine, and a lot of people have trouble finding that. And apparently there's only one place in China that makes the rose wine. So it's a little green bottle. It's from Tianjin. And a lot of people have trouble finding that, and they'll all ask us what's an alternative, and I don't.
It was sherry, dry sherry.
I don't know because I didn't really try sherry, right? Yeah. But I think that's in our research. People say sherry, and there's also rice wine. Mm-hmm. If you want more Japanese type flavors, you probably want mirin. You want sake. You want dashi.
In our everyday cooking, we use a lot of fish sauce.
Fish sauce.
That's our secret weapon too. Well, we don't use it so much in the sous vide because I think it's a little stronger, only for more Vietnamese dishes. But I think fish sauce in our everyday stir fries, we use it quite a bit just to give it that.
Well, I actually even use it in pastas because sometimes in pastas you would use anchovies, right? So instead of anchovies, I would put fish sauce for that little extra kick.
I always think that's one of the most intimidating things about trying to cook in a new cuisine is reading the recipes and being okay, I'm happy to make a few different recipes, but which ones of these am I going to order and use in multiple recipes, and which ones are just just a weird thing that is only used in that recipe, and now you have an entire bottle of it. So I think it's good to kind of know, like, if you have these and you make more than one dish, you'll probably end up using these over and over again.
If you do a lot of Asian braises, you probably want some star anise. You probably want some. I'm gonna just list. I'm just like, oh, what's in my cupboard right now? Some dried chilies, some Sichuan peppercorns. All those things last a long time, and I feel like we buy one pack and we've been using it forever. I mean, like a lot of people say that they expire, but I'm like, hey, the dry spices should be okay.
Yes, just said Sichuan peppers. Yes, we use Sichuan peppers.
Sichuan peppercorn. It's not the same as a black pepper. It's a little numbing.
I love the Szechuan peppercorns. It is just a unique kind of feeling while you're eating them.
Cumin. I'm gonna just keep listening.
But I think most of those people would like soy. Like as long as you have soy sauce, the wine, garlic, ginger, and scallion. I think that's the base for most things.
Nice. Let's see.
There you go. Yeah, we have a ton of that.
So there's a lot, like most cuisines, there's a lot of different condiments and sauces that are kind of classics that are out there. What ones have you found are really worth, making yourself, and which ones are just, you can get a better store-bought version, and so you don't worry about making it from home?
It's a hard question.
Because most of the time, the stuff that we have can become a sauce. Like, for example, like the barbecue pork, you can easily buy a jar of barbecue pork, but we already have the basis of making this sauce. So I wouldn't want to go buy a jar of barbecue pork sauce because that's I will only be able to use it for barbecue pork. I can use all these basic bases to make other things as well. So I don't usually buy jar sauces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We mostly, like in most cases, we've always made our own sauces. Because I think like everything we like to do it to our own flavors, and some things we don't like, and some things are too salty or too sweet. Most of the time, too salty for us. So we usually try and cut back on the salt, kind of like that, the sugar, and then
it's a Cantonese thing.
And so we try and make most of our sauces. I'm just trying to think of a sauce that we don't make. I guess like we wouldn't make oyster sauce.
Yeah, because you would need to like dry on oyster and grind it and all that, so we won't do that.
Or XO sauce, like.
I actually considered making XO sauce. Then the materials that you need is quite expensive, so I'm like,
Okay, yeah, that's how we base it. We base it on price.
I like it.
If it's going to be too expensive, we're not gonna make it. If it's cheaper to buy, we'll buy it.
I think that's always like the interesting trade-off is looking at those. It's like I've like made my own ketchup once and made mustard once or twice just so I understand the process. But like I always buy those. But like barbecue sauce, I'm much happier when I make it myself. Yeah. And like honey mustard, I prefer to make myself. So if anyone else has any questions, be sure to drop them into the comments. I have a few more to go through, but we want to get to all of yours. So make sure you drop them in the comments and we'll get to them.
Amazon shopping cart. So the reason why we never put an Amazon shopping cart out for the Chinese sauces, we thought it was way too expensive for what it was, because we looked at the price and we're like, no, we cannot suggest this to people. Like it's kind of ridiculous at the price. So we never did that. But we are actually trying to find some sauces and trying to see how we can get it out to people. So we'll see how that goes in a couple of next little while.
Nice. If you have questions on how to package your own sauces and stuff, I know someone that I can put you in touch with. They went the Mediterranean route, but they have a line of olive oil that's imported from a vineyard over in Italy. And so I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to you about how some of that can work if you end up doing some of your own stuff.
Perfect. Thank you.
I know you did an experiment with using sous vide for ramen eggs. Can you talk a little bit about that experiment?
That was difficult only because it's impossible to peel those stupid things. We went through 4 dozen eggs. Like 4 dozen eggs. We went through all of them. And we tried peeling it because, when we're filming, we're trying to do the replacements so we don't need to wait 24 hours and film the next thing. So I think like 2 days before, a day before I started making them, I tried to peel them. They all broke. Next ones broke. They all had like we could not take photos of them. And so finally we got to one. We're like, okay, we have to film anyway. We're not buying any more eggs. We can't eat this many eggs.
Can't freeze those very well.
Those I don't. Can you freeze eggs? I've never tried. So we ate them all. And somehow I don't know. Oh, we called so many people over.
All right, we made ramen for like 3.
We had 3
groups
ramen
of
parties.
friends.
Yeah, 3 ramen parties. Just kept going. Want to come for ramen? Perfect. Come on over.
All you have to do is peel eggs.
Yeah. Well, actually, they were already peeled.
They were just kind of ugly. Yeah.
So, but finally, on the day we're filming,
on camera,
it peeled properly. So that was good.
Nice.
Which meant I still had to wait the extra day because I had to get the beauties with the ones that look nice. So yeah, I think that was hardest, and I found peeling them underwater or under a very light running tap helped. And I think for this one, like you had a question, what would I not sous vide or what I may not sous vide? I think eggs is one of those things that I would only consider sous videing if it was already on at a temperature that was close to there.
Well, and also if you're making like 10, 20 at one go, right? Yeah. And I think what's really difficult about the ramen eggs is that the whites needs to be set, but the egg yolk needs to be custardy.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that it's cooked enough but not cooked enough at the same time?
And we also got a lot of complaints about that one because everyone lives at different altitudes and water boils at different temperatures, and like, guys, figure it out. It was just there for example. We're only trying to inspire you. You guys have to do some experimenting, That's the fun of it.
Eggs are one of those things that I still struggle with a lot using sous vide. I've been using it for 10 years and I still don't fully understand how to cook proper eggs with it.
Yeah.
I feel like eggs too they're like a dish that you have for breakfast when you're ready for it, or like I never plan ahead. So I'm never like, oh, I want to experiment now with eggs to see what it is. I'm more like it's 9 a.m. and I want something to put on my, English muffin. So I'm just going to put it in a pan because I know how that works.
Right. I think another thing that was difficult for that one was that we were working with a lot of alcohol, and we usually don't work with that much alcohol with our recipes. But that one was like the first batch was not edible.
That was so disgusting.
Yeah, that was not good. That's why we started flambeing it and boiling it out. That's when we started doing that because the first batch was, horrendous.
It's always fun having the failures.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of those. No one ever sees them, but we have a lot.
Well, I really appreciate the two of you coming on. You have so much knowledge, and your culinary expertise is very different than mine, and so I love just learning about that different cuisines and different ways that you can do stuff. It's always just so fascinating to me. We have Alistair says, since North American Chinese food exists, does Australian Chinese food exist, and will you be making any soon?
Actually, we eat pretty traditional at home. And because there's actually where I came from, where I used to live when I was in Australia, it's called Gold Coast. And literally when I was growing up, I was the only Chinese person there. So all the food is made by my family. And there are Chinese restaurants, but they're all very traditional and they usually only cater to Chinese people. So there wasn't really like an American Chinese food like General Tso's chicken. But I do realize that there are some that's a little that's geared towards Australians, and they call it dim sum. It's like it's a dim sum, like a siu mai, and they deep fry it.
Nice.
I've never had it. They sell it at the fish and chip shops.
That's awesome.
That's what I know of, like an Australian Chinese food. In Canada, I know there's chicken balls. When I first heard of it, I'm like, what is this? It's a like a piece of chicken breast with like total like donut breading kind of thing, and I call it a savory timbit.
They almost missed the train because they wanted to see what chicken balls were.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess I'll tell the story. So we were taking a train from Vancouver all the way to Toronto. Just kind of like I didn't go all the way to Toronto, I went to Winnipeg. So that train is basically on the railroad that's built by Chinese people. And along the way, in some random middle of nowhere town, there's a Chinese restaurant. So we went there, and obviously it's all the very classic Canadian Chinese dishes, chicken balls, ginger beef, all those things, and it's all fried to a crisp. And when I first had chicken balls, it's this much meat and this much breading. And the sauce was neon red, and I'm like, is this Chinese food? But I mean, it is in that area, but that's the first time I've ever had chicken balls. I'm like, oh my God, this is a thing.
It's always interesting to see people's take on various types of food.
Yeah. Well, they have to adapt. I guess that's what the people there liked, right?
Yep.
That's what there is.
Well, if anyone wants more of Carmen and Kevin, you can check out their great YouTube channel, Kind of Cooking, their website, kindofcooking.com, and check them out at the upcoming Sous Vide Summit. You can grab tickets for that for 15% off using the promo code SVS15 off. And go to afmeasy.com/2020. Pick up your tickets. They're going to be speaking. I'm speaking. Kevin is speaking. And then we have a bunch of keynotes like AJ Schaller, Rich Rosendale, James Bricione, a bunch of meatheads coming back again, Dave Petranczyk from PolyScience. So a real good lineup of some really knowledgeable people. So hope all of you can come join us. And Carmen and Kevin, thank you so much for coming on Exploring Sous Vide and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
It's been
you.
fun.
This has been Exploring Sous Vide. We're all about helping you get the most out of your sous vide machine while talking to some of the biggest names in the industry. Until next time, I'm Jason Logston. Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next time. Awesome. Thank you.